IVM.
Hey, welcome to Shunya One, guys. I'm your host Shiladitya. I'm at Shiladitya on Twitter, and this is episode 24. Welcome to the show, everyone. In the studio with me is my co-host Amit Doshi.
Hey, what's going on, people?
So episode 24. We've had some activity over the past week on our Slack channel. And I think quite a few conversations popping up there.
Yeah, I know. It's been pretty cool, man. It's been a lot of... it's interesting. I would love to see more happen, but I mean, like, I love the fact that we've got some real stuff happening over here.
So apart from episode comments, I think there's a lot of conversation around
we spoke about
tech and news and new Pixel Buds and whatnot.
We spoke about the Pixel phones. We had a little fun at Ola's new fundraising expense.
Yeah.
It's been nice to have this going on.
Good to see the tech community around Shunya One slowly forming.
I think maybe we should call out somebody who did something interesting, right, on this. So Bhau Kaka, maybe.
Yes.
Bhau Kaka has been... He's been on it.
He's been quite active on our
he's been the one who's asking about what were your thoughts on the Pixel phone, and he got into a good, interesting discussion around that. Same with the Ola thing. He was kind of we had an interesting talk around that stuff as well. So yeah, he's been a great contributor, and hope to get more of you guys on and doing stuff with us here.
Yes, so details are on our page and at the end of this show again, so you have to listen.
Or actually, we can just give it out right now. We don't need to go all the way to the end, right? We can just tell them. So ivmpodcast.com/Shunya1. You'll see a big button over there where you can request an invitation to the Slack channel.
Great. Yeah. And we also have some iTunes reviews.
So this is something we're going to start doing, right? I mean, like, I think this should be a little fun, and hopefully it'll motivate you guys to go out and give us reviews. We want your reviews. So we've gotten a couple of 5-star reviews, so I'm going to read one out every week, and hopefully you give me enough that we can keep going with the 5-star reviews forever. So the first one we got is from Arpit Bob. Stumbled across the podcast, and it's become an instant favorite. Ended up going back and listening to all the past episodes, another one of IVM's great podcasts. Yes, it is one of our great podcasts. Listen to all of our great podcasts on the IVM Podcast website or app.
Great. And without further ado, let's get on with the show.
Yeah, let's introduce our guest who's just been sitting here and looking at our faces.
Yes, today, so we have Bala Menon here. Bala, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
And Bala is, your Twitter handle is PMenonB.
Yeah.
Right?
I used to be called Bala __ Menon, but there's too many underscores.
I like that. 2 underscores is cool, man.
Yeah, I was underscoring myself too much. But yeah, I mean...
But this is PMenonB now. It's formal.
It's formal, yeah.
Yes.
It's private.
So you're what we call a product strategist.
Yeah.
And I want to get into that for sure because... God knows what that means.
Bring it on.
But before that, I obviously have known you since you were an entrepreneur yourself.
Yeah.
And you've built some interesting stuff.
Hold on, I heard there's an earlier connection than that.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, we're both Anshakti Nagar kids.
Okay.
Yes. So, yeah, there's a whole history behind what that means.
I know.
But I don't know. I don't know if you want to go there. But that... In your story, I know as an entrepreneur, as a product founder, you've obviously played various roles. So I think that's sort of what has led to what you're doing today. So why don't you tell us a little bit of that before we get into the kind of stuff you're working on today?
Yeah. So I think primarily when people think about product or an idea, they think about building a business plan and how it's going to be launched and the kind of people they want to be associated with. And, all that stuff. I started coding when I was 12 years old. I mean, I got my specs because, I would stare I would just stare at a computer screen for way too long. And I learned whatever coding that I know back then, looking at my cousin's AppTech book on coding. I mean, it was just a book on JavaScript and CSS.
So listen, you're way younger than we are. So contextualize back then. Because for me, 12 years old, I was learning basic.
I don't want to talk about what I was doing 12 years ago, man.
When I was 12 years old, not 12 years ago.
Still.
Right? So when I was 12 years old, I think Pentium 2 had just come out. Pentium 2 or Pentium 3 had just come out.
Sorry, I misunderstood. When you were 12 years old. Okay.
When I was 12 years old. I mean, contextually, to put it in context, I'm 29 now.
Okay.
So it was just like a fun time to be around, right? So Yahoo still had that homepage when you had round things on top of the page, and then you had different buttons, and it was just a very, very crowded page. And I loved that. Like, I looked at the source of the page and I wanted to replicate that page looking at what I had learned, and I had spent good amount of time just staring at the computer screen. I got my specs. So I started coding when I was 12, and then went on to kind of, learn better forms of kind of coding stuff. And, for me, when I was thinking about problems, I was just thinking about solving them with technology, with getting my friends on it and, getting them to use it, right? So the context in which I thought of solving problems was very different from how an entrepreneur today thinks, or how I think of problems today, for that matter, right? It was just that, you get your computer, sketch it out on a piece of paper, how it's going to look like, what it is, think about the problem, and just go for it, and just get your friends to use it as quickly as possible. And, there's also the sense of, you're also very restless, right? So there's a sense of restlessness in the fact that I want to get this out as quickly as possible. So there's a sense of hacking together things. It didn't have to be perfect. You just had to get a sense of whether this would work or not, right?
What you call an MVP, basically.
What fancy people call MVP today.
Yes.
But, I also had this healthy dose of self-doubt, right? I mean, I was not that popular in college, 11th and 12th and all. And, so you didn't know if what you build would have that kind of appeal for people, because you didn't have that kind of appeal, right? So what you build was like an extension of who you are. And
You're basically telling every geek story.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it was just about like putting it out there, and you're not seeking validation. You're just seeking, you just wanted to get it out there and see where it goes. So yeah, I mean, my sense of building a product comes from that, right? And I went on to build 2 companies, one which did message routing, based on presence, and another company which did content personalization for media companies. Right. The first was called HashMe, and the other was called Ductile Labs. Yep. Before this, I used to be the head of product at Venture Foundry, where we built a lot of products ourselves.
Right.
And now I help, companies. I consult with companies. I build my own stuff, and I'm also an independent researcher for augmentative systems, which we should get into.
Neat.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in this whole journey, obviously, as a founder, like I was saying, as a founder, you pretty much do everything from scratch, and you say, hey, this is what I want to build, and you gather your team, like you said, and your role and especially if it's a product focused startup which you're doing, then the founder is the guy who runs product, right? Typically, he's the guy who designs or conceptualizes, visualizes, and then gets people to execute behind that, whether it's the design guy, the coding guy, the user experience, whatever. So it's usually the founder's prerogative as far as a startup grows into becoming a big corporation. So those are typically what product people are. Eventually, product people come from this sort of ex-founder sort of a background. But of late, I think we are seeing people even learn to become product folks, right? I think there is...
It's become aspirational, right? So, I mean...
there's a skill set which defines a product person.
Yeah, so there's this apotheosis of people who are product, right? I mean, they say, hey, I work in product, I'm a product manager or like head of product or whatever. It seems great. Like it's a fun thing to have on your profile. Also,
it also seems vague.
It's very vague, right? It's when a lot of people say that, look, I work in product, it kind of absolves them from explaining to the world what they really do. So, a lot of generalists now prefer calling themselves product people because they don't need to have specialties beyond the point, right? I mean, you could say, look, I'm a coder, like I'm a programmer. I hate the word coder. So, like I'm a programmer and... But, I define where the product's going, right? So, I define or I kind of get to decide where this product is headed or, what I need this product to do. So, I have a little bit of an interjection to make here, right? So, when you think about founders who are technical, right? They think of, so let's say if you want to write a program, you really have to understand what is the problem that you're trying to solve because you have to
logically define it
and, really go to the depths of what you're trying to solve. And that's how you kind of create the program, right? So the good thing about that, and it's also what how a lot of founders used to think. Microsoft had product management programs where it was a purely technical role, right? Unlike what you're seeing now, which has become offshoots of marketing and other things. So if you look at the way programmers thought back then, and I still thought that way, which is I would like to spend a considerable amount of time in defining the problem. Right, which meant going and doing a lot of research on, talking to people. Right. People call it user research now, but I didn't know what user research was back then, right? I would just go talk to a bunch of people, ask them, look at it from different perspectives. I would spend a lot of time in kind of thinking about how it's going to look like, because I have to write code for it, right? I would also spend a lot of time in kind of thinking how I'm going to get my first 1,000 users, because I was really bad at talking to people. So I had to plan for it, right? I had to build virality into the product itself rather than relying on marketing, because I sucked at it. So, thinking about problem from the perspective of defining it was great, because, that's what product managers do today, right? But I didn't know that. And, when I could only code back then, I didn't know, I could write well, so I could convince a bunch of people to kind of take my product. I could also, I had a sense of design, I had a sense of aesthetic, right? So I didn't know how to design. So I would just spend an insane amount of time looking at free web pages, and if you remember, there were template sites. All that, right? And design and news and whatnot. I self-taught myself how to do
Template Monster. That's the one I remember.
Template Monster, Theme Forest.
Theme Forest, yeah.
And a bunch of others, right?
And they still exist.
They do. Theme Forest.
And I had the prettiest looking MySpace page, because I could write CSS and it was amazing. I had glitters on it, and it had marquee text and all that. Women loved me. No man didn't. But it was amazing, right? So the skill sets that you developed, right, when you just wanted to get your product out there, we could hack things together. But the good thing is you would consider everything that a user might need, right? To put things into context, I was the second or the fifth ever developer to build on top of the YouTube API when it first came out, right? So they had a attributions page where they kind of showcased developers on the YouTube API using the YouTube API, right? So I had built something called Ngix, which was a video search engine, which which kind of, it was a better interface. It was faster, and it kind of it recommended stuff based on, it created playlists for you and stuff. And it also kind of, and it was also a playground for me to kind of look at images and filter out boobs and dicks, right? In images. I'm not sure if it's going to be beeped out, but it was great, right? So the genesis of what I learned or where I learned to build product comes from that. Right. So if you look at products like that, it was just hacking together a bunch of stuff. But I had really thought of what a customer would need. It had this notify me button, which would notify you when a new video came about. Right. It was not. So you had really thought of all the things that a customer might need. Right. People call it user research, and that's what it is. But back then, I didn't know that I was learning all these skills. Right. Cut to 2010, when I was, when the product was being built for my first ever company, it all came back to me. Right. I didn't know that I was doing UX, but I had done a lot of groundwork for UX back then. I didn't know that I was, building some marketing automation stuff with MailChimp. But I had used some of the stuff, right, for email campaigns and all of that. I didn't know that I was doing analytics, but I just loved looking at dashboards, right? Because it was validation that, there's something is happening. Something's happening. Someone really wants to kind of play with my product. Right. And the rest is tech. And, that just came naturally to me. So I think it's a way of thinking, right? So when you talk about product strategy and when you talk about product in general, it's a way of thinking, and it's a way of really spending a lot of time looking at the problem from different angles rather than the solution. So a lot of people now, because they are specialists, right, they have to define a product from the perspective of marketing or design or technology, they have to come from that angle. So they tend to focus on the solution rather than the problem.
So
they spend a lot of time, saying that, look, we want to grow the product. I'm going to look at the marketing side of things, and I'm going to do marketing automation, analytics, all of that, right?
I'm going to look at I have to take this from 100K to 10 million users. So I'm going to look at what is working within the flow and just push that.
Correct. So they're coming from the solution side, right? So they're not really looking at, as you rightly said, a lot of founders become product owners. And the good thing about that is, founder-led companies who are product oriented tend to do well. So look at Paytm. VSS still has, I think, a big say in how the product turns out to be, right? And he's not just looking at growth, or he's not just looking at retention. He's not looking at all of that, right?
Looking at a broader perspective.
He's looking at the broader perspective. So he's got his hands and legs in all aspects of the problem.
It's easier for the entrepreneur to have that broader perspective, right? Because you can have you can have a long-term view.
Yeah.
Because you're not really reporting to anybody about short-term numbers.
Yeah.
Other than your investors, I guess, which is...
I agree. And the good thing is, you're, as a founder, you also have a lot of power, or, a lot of convincing power to start with the different departments, right? I mean, if I'm like the head of marketing, right, I have very limited reach, or I have very limited persuasive power to kind of, talk to my CFO and say, look, I need so much allocated, or I need this done. But when you're the founder, everyone just listens to you, right? So you have a certain way to kind of persuade, because you're going from the perspective of the vision, right? So you're selling the vision and saying, look, I started the company with this. So there's a certain level of pedigree that you can, you can pull the rank, right? And you can say, look, I started the company for this, and it's best that we kind of tag together and build this.
So when that founder role doesn't exist, right? So coming to what you're doing today, after the roles you've played in your own companies and own startups, when you look at since we've defined what a product strategist is or what their job should be, how does that translate to, when you jump in with another company and tell them that, hey, listen, you guys are doing this all wrong. Let me tell you how to do it.
It doesn't. I mean, honestly, if I say that, I'll just go out of business, and I have to
Diplomacy is part of being able to be a consultant.
Very, very early on. So I never got to work in a really, really big company ever. So I've never had a proper job in a big company. I've always done my own thing. But if you get to play a product manager's role in a large company, you realize how difficult it is, right? So because you have very little power, right? You have very little autonomy, and you have to kind of get marketing, design, tech, all of these people under one, and you need to kind of convince them to do things, and you have very little autonomy, right? You have very little power. So very quickly you learn how to be diplomatic. You very quickly learn how to kind of persuade people and all of that, right? And I sucked at it, right? I did not have, so I had to learn what NLP was. I used to listen to Tony Robbins and all that. So you just you can't afford to mess that up. So coming back to your question, when I engage with a company, it's very difficult to tell them that they suck, right? Most often and you don't have to, because the very fact that they've reached out to someone to do something is acknowledgement of the fact that the founder recognizes their weakness, right? So the founder recognizes there's either a product area, business area they want to get into, but they don't know how to get there, either through a technology enablement process or by innovating or doing something in there. Or they already have a tech team, right? So they already have a tech or product team who are building something, but they aren't kind of, there where the founder sees them to be, right? So you go in and you kind of restructure the process, you kind of, help them with an outsider's perspective, and you build a strategy for them.
Right.
And you also work with them. So good thing is, I don't know if it's unique to me, but, the good thing about a lot of product people who are founders in the past is because they've kind of, held different hats, right? So they've kind of had different hats.
Right.
So I have very deep empathy for the design folks,
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of people kind of, it's like an afterthought for a lot of people, and now it's in vogue to kind of be design friendly and, design first. But
and I remember when I first started, design was just something you slapped on top.
Exactly. Right?
That's literally how you thought of design.
So UX has to be more holistic, and more than UX, it's customer experience, right? So which is going one step further and saying, look, like, I want to own the entire customer journey and be better for customers, right? It means being trustful of customers. It means that augmenting what they want to do, predicting their user needs, and the technology and design teams need to work together, right? The marketing team has to work together, because so when I go in, there's this deep sense of empathy because I've been there. Right, I know what it means to kind of have an AWS server which you expect 50,000 users for, paying that much, right? You already scaled up the server and like you're expecting 50,000 users and you get like 500, right? You have to try different things, and you have deep empathy for the marketing folks. You have deep empathy for the tech guys, right? Mostly the tech guys have the weakest voice in companies. And the reason being that a lot of also you don't understand one thing, right? India doesn't have a unified language, right? So a lot of people have language issues. Right. Some of them are from like Gujarat. They've been to like Hindi medium schools. They can't communicate really well in English, but they're really good programmers, right? They really are good at what they do. The same with like marketing sales folks or customer service guys, right? They are so subservient because, in our culture kind of expects people to be subservient.
There's a cultural difference.
So, you're also kind of mediating culture, right? You're also mediating culture. You're also mediating the, people's worldviews, etc. And you go in and, you play different, there are companies where I know that we have to invent something. Mm-hmm. Right. To give you an example, how would you build pre and post intervention healthcare systems? Right. So you're inventing something that did not exist before. Mm-hmm. Right. It's business units. Right. It's revenue centers for them. So it makes a hell of a lot of difference for the founder to be involved. Right. But you also have to understand that you have to be cognizant about the fact that there is a business which is thriving right now. Mm-hmm. It's also about convincing the founder that look, you're a thriving business, but you have to kind of take your attention away for a bit and then focus on this, and we very quickly will have to prove this. Right. So I do three things. One is I look at problems and what I can do with them. If there's something that I can personally solve, I either take it to a company who's already doing something similar and say, look, let's build it together. Right. Or I pitch it to someone and say, look, let's kind of build this. Or I do it myself. Right. When you take it to someone, it's very important that, you prove it, because it's such a new concept, right? You're not innovating, you're actually inventing stuff. It's such a new concept. It's important for you to prove to them that this works very quickly. Right? So you're talking in the next, once you have the initial strategy meeting and you kind of decide this is what you're going to do, you have around 3 weeks to 45 days, right? For you to kind of very quickly figure out if this is something that their existing customers would use. They're not going to, and that means that, using whatever it is that you can, you don't have time to build forms and sites and all that. You would use Google Forms, right? And then use their API to kind of, get data. So
it's like rapid prototyping, basically.
It's exactly rapid prototyping. It's more than prototyping because you're actually giving people.
You're building a product there.
You're building a product, right? So it doesn't look that great. It doesn't look that great, but it does what it's supposed to do. And you quickly kind of form a hypothesis. You validate your hypothesis whether this works or not, and then you form new positive statements. And I think that's really important, especially when you're working with another company. It's even more important when it's when it's for you, because you're so restless and the constraints don't exist, right? You can do anything and everything. And when I was growing up, the constraints were either I don't have money to buy like a server, so it has to be it has to kind of piggyback upon someone. There were these really cheap servers, right, which was like $10 a month, and then it was constrained by that. Rackspace Cloud came over, which was such a big difference because you pay $150 and pretty much can do anything on it, right?
Yeah. This is pre-AWS.
This is pre-AWS, right? So Rackspace still has it. So Rackspace Cloud was pre-AWS. At one point, I remember when Twitter was still young and they had their API. I did something and we were my server farm was sending a whole bunch of traffic to Twitter, and Twitter blocked our IP block, which meant that everyone on Rackspace Cloud was blocked out from Twitter because we were just sending like a whole bunch. And that's because like we just made like a stupid boo boo. And I remember like someone from their current senior management team kind of wrote back and said, look, this is fucked up, and like we have to like look at it and do this or whatever. But like they spent an insane amount of time correcting that, right? And they took ownership of that, and that was really, really, really good. And if you remember, there was something called TwitPic. So Twitter did not. Twitter did not have their
photo posting capability.
So they did not have that. And the guy who ran it was Noah Everett, right? And he was like a one-man operation. No one knew about it, and they were already doing like 1 million users or whatever. And one day this guy comes out and he says, "Look, he takes a video of his servers were literally in his living room, and he takes a video of it and he says, look, it's a one-man operation, it's just me, so like calm your nerves. It's like if something gets screwed up, I'll get to it I'll get to it, right? Because I'm building it myself." And I remember that there's a whole bunch of people on Twitter who kind of helped him, and we talked to each other and stuff, right?
And that's the story of a lot of open source projects. Which
Charity
become
Water,
mainstream.
right? So if you remember Pete Cashmore, he was just about setting up Mashable. And Charity Water was such a big thing, and people built the Charity Water portal based on people they met on Twitter, and then they just kind of collaborated and talked on Skype and stuff. They've never met in person, but there was a live stream,
right? And
they raised like $1 million or whatever. I'm not sure how much they raised, but they raised a whole bunch of money based on stuff that people built who never met each other.
Yeah, so I think that's the story of a lot of, in general, product companies or product, I would say, small hacks. But
it goes on to become like really large
ideas,
right? So because people so the hashtag was not invented by Twitter. It was invented by a guy called Chris Messina,
who just started
using it,
and people picked it up.
And RT, right? I mean, people retweeted tweets. That was again.
Cool. So I think we're going to take a quick break and come back and talk some more about product frameworks, because since we're getting into the discussion around product, let's understand how it really works.
In a world where people are busy playing Mendicote at Diwali parties, two men decide to go all in the river.
Don't you mean on the river?
On the river.
Oh yeah.
Two men will go where no one has ever gone before, to a studio with no air conditioning or Coke Zero, to talk about poker.
Hey, order lo na yaar, koi kya hai ye bakwas?
The SpartanPoker.com presents Mera Kaam Poker, hosted by Azim Banatwala,
the best comedian in the world, according to himself,
and Peter Abraham,
not related to John.
New episodes out every Wednesday on the IBM podcast app or any other podcasting app you use. And for all our listeners who want to try out their hand at poker, you can log on to thespartanpoker.com, register yourself as a user with the promo code IBM, and you will get 200 bonus cash, which you can use to play poker for free. See you at the tables.
So welcome back, guys. I think we went quite deep into, how a product founder thinks and how a tech founder basically becomes a product guy via the various roles he plays. And in fact, a lot of the discussion we understood, and I also understand that, having been a tech founder myself, where it's easy for a tech founder to sort of grow into a product role, and then eventually you figure out, hey, I am a product person because, hey, I had to put on all these hats. But what's the story with if you're not a tech founder? Like, if you don't have the sense of, solving everything with technology, I think the definition of a product person is now grown into including even non-tech founders. So what do you see as the genesis of that, and what is the core understanding that a non-tech founder needs to be thinking along the lines of product.
I'll sidetrack for 2 minutes and talk about like a larger challenger, right? So if you look at building companies, there's a dearth of information out there as to how to build companies, and there's people who are prophesizing about building companies, etc. What should go on your pitch deck and all that. It's very difficult then for someone who hasn't had that experience, who haven't built something and launched it yet, to kind of grasp what it takes to launch a product, right? Especially when they're building a tech-enabled product.
Yeah.
If you're setting up a shop, it's a different story, right? There's a bunch of people who tell you, how to do stuff, and you have your various examples out there. But as a non-tech founder, that's a problem. But the bigger challenge, rather, is that no one has the habit of reading books, right? So no one's really reading to understand. There's a lot of posturing that happens, and people take one page out of a book and publish an article around it, and the INCs of the world and the Business Insiders of the world are built on that. I'm sorry to diss them, but like they're built on that, right? I mean, they would take like one concept out of a page or a sentence, and then they kind of build an entire story around it. And I wouldn't blame them because they need their clicks.
No, but also there is a need. I mean, sorry to kind of this, but there's a little bit of a need for simplified versions of complicated books.
Sure.
So
if you take the entire context of the book, right? You can't take like one concept.
Oh, of course.
Right. So you can't take like one concept of Dale Carnegie's how to influence people and say that, look, don't diss people. This is how you
become popular.
Exactly. Right? So don't diss people. I mean, that's there, right? You can't. So the reason why I wanted to sidebar there is because a lot of non-tech founders are not reading the kind of stuff that tech founders are, right? A lot of tech people read very nuanced versions of how to launch a product, right? Right from setting up a server to kind of getting your first 100 users and then how to set up your analytics and all that, right? So non-tech founders are not essentially reading that. I'm not saying that everyone isn't, but most of them aren't, right? And it's a real challenge for them because they are getting these toned down, watered down versions of it in different forms and ways, and it's also confusing the heck out of them, right? Simplest thing you can do right now is to like go to Google, search how to create a pitch deck, right? And there are like 100 different versions and 100 different perspectives on it, and you just get so bogged down that you never get started there. Right. So I think the first thing a tech founder or a non-tech founder should do is kind of create their own version of what they're building, right? Define the problem really, really well. And most of them do because they have typed out versions of like what the product they're building and what is the market opportunity, etc. And they get it. And I would go on to say that they actually get it better than a tech founder would, because tech founder is thinking like, I need to get this out, right? I've defined the problem enough, and like I know what goes into it, etc. I'm not looking at the market, I'm not looking at that. I just want to get it out into the hands of people, right? I'm just hacking things together. So a non-tech founder probably has that. So they need to really define that. Once they've done with that, they should, instead of setting up a company, they should always. So I think one big challenge that non-tech founders have is they're always trying to set up a company rather than launch a product. The difference between both is that when you're building a company, right, you need to have every facet of the company covered. So they go into hiring, they try to get the right kind of people, right? They're looking for office spaces.
They're looking for a CTO.
They're looking for a CTO. Okay, one thing about CTOs is that, if you're a CTO, you're in a leadership role, right? You are so far away from technology, it's not even funny, right? So you've left the stratosphere.
And let me say, they're looking for a tech co-founder.
They're looking for a tech co-founder who's probably either a programmer, or someone who's held like a CTO-ish kind of role, or a team lead kind of role. But I don't think that's the challenge, right? The challenge rather is for them to really understand that they're launching a product. They're not building a company yet. And for the product to be successful is really more important than the company to be set up, right? So you don't have to go to a CA, get your registration done, and you don't need to have like a office space, or you don't need any of that, right? So you need like a person who can design. You need like a person who can code, and you need someone who can either do partnerships and get you your first 1,000 users, right? And that's all you need. And if you're able to kind of hack this together and really not cram too many features together, right? So think about really what you're trying to solve and build a scenario as to what is it that you're trying to achieve. So to give you an example, if you're building a marketplace for dog owners, right? All you need to think about is what are the key value propositions, or what are the key user needs that a dog owner would have, right? You need to kind of pick the right kind of dog breed and understand about it, right? You need a vet, you need someone to kind of walk them, etc. So you would rather think about that and build just the right amount of features so that these user needs are met. You wouldn't go ahead and build an entire company
first
around.
thing won't be like, oh, I will host this on AWS.
Yeah,
that will not be a non-tech founder's first thought.
No, not just non-tech, right? I mean, you could also be like a design-led founder.
Right. Oh, this will be a responsive website.
This will be more than that. They would think through design, and they would also think about.
Okay, this will be material.
Do you
design.
want to make fun of a marketing founder now? just asking. I mean, like.
Marketing founder will be what? Like flashy and like have.
We must send 10 million SMSs.
That's a spammer, man. Like, this is just, that's Dr. Batra's. Don't kill me. But I mean, I'm saying the key to answer your question, right? So the key difference is it's a difference between building a product versus building a company, right? A product-oriented founder, whether it's a tech or a design or a marketing, whatever founder, would only look at getting the product out there and achieving what they can achieve, what they're really good at, like playing to their strengths. A non-tech founder should actually play to their strengths, right? If they've been an analyst in the past.
So in when you say that, sorry to cut you off there, but what is the skill set which is essential, even being a non-tech person? Is it empathy, understanding user behavior? Is it what? So I remember we were talking about there was a role in Google at one point for someone who was a product ethicist.
Yes.
Design ethicist.
Design ethicist, right?
Yeah,
and I mean, like I was saying, to me that sounded like the big head guy,
the
guy who was
so
like just a role for the sake of a role.
But that's kind of what happened to the guy, right? I mean, like he wrote some very famous memo that circulated all over Google. And he got the job as chief ethicist and product philosopher or something like that. And basically once they gave him that role, then after that it was like, okay, go think about things, tell us every year what you're thinking, and then we'll try and see what we want to do after that. So basically they took him out of having any kind of real responsibility.
See, I'd like to interject and say, so the guy's name is Tristan Harris,
right.
And he runs this thing called timewellspent.io, if anyone wants to check it out. He talks about designing products which optimize for time,
right.
That you spend and attention, right? Mm-hmm. And being cognizant of where you spend your attention and what role tech companies have, product companies have in minimizing that.
Right.
So you can look at product from various angles, right? You can look at it from the angle of ethics. You can look at it from the angle of making money. You can look at it from the angle of so these are all how you think about it and what your outcomes are going to be, right? So coming back to your question as to what skill sets would a non-tech founder have, they should just play to their strengths and whatever you are, right? So if you're a previous marketing person, then you should play to your strengths of saying that, look, I understand how to acquire users, but I don't have the skill sets to kind of build this, or I don't have the skill sets to kind of design this, etc. So I'm just gonna expand myself, right? Yeah. I'm just gonna find people who would augment me or my capabilities to build this. But you should be very, very clear in your head that the reason I'm doing this is to kind of A, quickly validate that this works, this idea or hypothesis works, and B, I need my skill set or what I'm really sure about is that I can get 1,000 users. Mm-hmm. Once I've validated that this works, I can get 1,000 users, and this is my plan for it, right? So, and really playing to your strengths is something that I would advise a non-tech founder to have. Because a lot of people are bogged down by all the advice that they give, right? I mean, find a tech co-founder, find this and that. You don't even need that, right? You could post it on. I mean, I made a ton of money from the site called rentacoder.com, right? Which was great. I mean, you could just go in, find a bunch of people who require sites and apps and stuff to be made, and you just code for them, and they pay you money, and it's great.
Yeah, I mean, and that's been around for ages, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
so
it still exists.
Yeah, it's been bought over by someone else. Now it's called, I don't know what's it called.
I think it's part of the Odesk Elan stuff now.
Yeah. So
Upwork or something like
Upwork
that.
Or whatever.
Upwork, yeah.
Upwork, it's called Upwork, yeah. So, you don't even need a tech co-founder. You know that this needs to be built, right? You can put a requirement up on Fiverr or Upwork or whatever, or put it up on like Hacker News or Twitter. I know some people who kind of put the requirement up on Tinder, right? And found
What?
That does not seem logical
so
to me.
Geeks will just love this. Like, what?
Yeah. So they've met people for the purpose of like hiring or like gig based.
Or there are some really mean girls out there, man.
Yeah, dude, this is...
That's
right
sexist,
swiping
man.
on
It could
dude.
be like guys as well. But anyway.
Well, whatever, man. It's just that seems just...
But yeah, I mean, I'm saying it's not important for you to like build all of that. What you should think about is the first 45 days. And my ex-boss at Venture Foundry, Jonathan, he used to say that, look, you need to get like a process done where you can very quickly go from a paper sketch to a something that people can touch and feel and play with in 45 days. Right. And that's a great thing, advice that you can give a non-tech founder is to kind of go ahead and think of the first 45 days and then think of the next 45 days and then think of 6 months. In 6 months, if you're not able to, like, people can call it product market fit or product channel fit or whatever you want to call it, right? If it doesn't make money, if you don't see it working, right, by whatever statistics that you hold yourself accountable for, then it's not worth doing more, right?
Yeah.
And you need to understand that, right? So it's the classic sunk cost fallacy, which is you've invested so much and you don't want to like give up, right?
Yeah, and then you keep thinking a little bit more. But
so
it's
whatever
actually
it takes, right?
idea.
I mean, whatever leverage that you can get to launch the first version of the product, you do that. Whether it's leveraging your ex partner or like going to your friend's company, which is a digital marketing outfit to kind of get your first 1,000 users, getting your first partnership for that matter, or going to like a company and saying that, look, I'll be my anchor customer, let me experiment with stuff that you already have,
right?
And if you don't have any money, that's fine, right? I mean, I've done this where like I had no money, I just went into like a company and said, look, your product sucks, let me do this for you and give me some money, I'll do this for you, but I'll own the IP for this, right, and send it to but I'll give you exclusivity for like 3 months. And most often than none, they're okay with doing stuff like that. So it's only, so you need to play to your strengths, right? Again, I'll come back to it. Just play to your strengths and understand that it's not that difficult.
So, I mean, again, just for context's sake, it's easy to say play to your strengths. It's easy to say, or rather, I would say the examples you mentioned earlier, there's so much random blogs which sort of tell you stuff about how to launch a product, but in the end, after you read it, you realize that I didn't learn squat because it's just a bunch of clickbait. So I remember we were talking at the start of the show about frameworks.
Yeah.
So I mean, to be honest, even when I hear the word frameworks, I think I mean, in the non-text
swing or
I think if it's tech, I understand that, but if it's in the context of a non-tech conversation framework, I think this is just MBA spiel.
Yeah.
So what are...
It's funny you should mention that, right? So the past, in the past 2 years or so, right? In the year or 2 years or whatever, there's a lot of conversations around mental models, right? It's metacognition, how to think about how you think, etc., which is great because like, you kind of teach yourself a process. You trust the process rather than your ability to get an outcome.
Okay.
Right. And
exactly. So,
right? So
instead of just feeling it, can you follow a set of principles? And does it really work? Do all these things really work?
Mental models obviously work, right? And if you look at top CEOs and people who are product leaders, etc., they all have a set process. Steve Jobs had his own process, and he famously said a bunch of stuff around like his process. IDEO has their own process, which now they call design thinking and all of that, right? Frog Design have their own process. I think processes are important because it's okay for you to fail, right? The difference in trusting a process versus trusting an outcome is that in a process-led economy, you trust the process for it to kind of keep getting successes one after the other, but it's okay if you fail once in a while, right? And you're not as failure is not prohibitive, right, for you to kind of try again. But in an outcome-led world, which I'm seeing a lot of the ecosystem kind of building around, right? In outcome-led world, you're not trusting the process at all. So there's a bunch of people who are just, building products and doing
you
all
hit
that.
a jackpot of some nature, and all of a sudden you're a genius.
Yeah. So to put this into context, right? I over the last couple of months, I've been researching this concept of augmentative systems. An augmentative system is like a framework that I've created.
It already sounds like a buzzword.
It is not, right? It's not. So I don't mean for it to, and this is something that I'm already implementing with companies and, for myself as well. So, to give you an example, this is due launch, but we all take screenshots all the time, right? The reason why we take screenshots is because either we want to remember something, or we want to be reminded of going somewhere, or we are just collecting beautiful stuff, right? Or like there's other use cases as well. So you do it either around Instagram, or like saving an address, or like saving a number or someone's photo or whatever. And
Or sharing a screenshot.
Sharing a screenshot.
Yeah,
like
that's my number one reason for it. I need to send somebody something that's common, just like...
Yeah, so you're just capturing information and sending it, or for yourself or for someone else. So one way of looking at it is by saying, look, I want to make this as simple as possible for it to be done, right? So iOS 11 now has this feature where you can mark up your screenshots,
right? Yeah.
Google Now on Tap, which is now called Google Lens, I think, has similar capabilities where you take a screenshot and kind of renders what's in the screenshot and tells you more about it. One way of looking at it is making a behavior easier to happen, right? For the behavior to keep happening.
Yeah, I mean, this is something which people naturally started to do, so they're enhancing it.
Right. Another way to look at it is from the perspective of an augmentative system. An augmentative system is basically something that augments your ability to either perform a certain process, to achieve a certain goal, or to make it easier for you to do something.
So is this through repetition and learning? Is this machine learning, or
it's a bunch of stuff, right? So it's not just machine learning.
Okay.
It's also design. It's also behavior design.
Okay.
It's also behavior design has like a bunch of facets to it, right? So it's UI elements. It's also your notifications. It's also the way things are placed on the app, what you say to the person, etc. Right? So you prime a user to do something. All of that, right? So that's behavior design. There's also technology, which enables all this, and then you have AI or your machine learning, right? Essentially, which is aiding in this.
Correct.
So essentially, if you look at coming back to the screenshot example, you can one of the things that I'm working on right now is understanding what's in a screenshot. Right, and not just understanding what's in a screenshot, which Evernote already does, but making that actionable. So if you saved a phone number, then it's available for you in your contact list,
right?
With the context that you save the number for, right? If you have screenshotted a location on Instagram, then that location's there in your saved places, right? Along with pictures, it's from their location. So essentially, if you take a fairly static thing like a screenshot and make it actionable, that's one example of augmentative tech.
Okay.
Right? Or an augmentative system. If you take that framework, right, and then if you implement it in a healthcare context, take a hospital, right? A hospital that treats heart patients. That's something that you call medical intervention, right? So you have a heart attack, you go to a hospital and you're treated for that heart attack. The hospital has no context of what's happening to you before, because the hospital has no access to you, right? And the hospital has very little access to you after the operation, which is post-operative care. so your what is preventative and what is post-operative care that behaviors can be augmented.
Okay.
So you can augment a person's ability to be healthy, and you can augment a person's ability to sustain health,
Right.
And recuperate and so on.
all that, right? So you can follow this framework to kind of put processes in place which would make it easier for them to develop behavior, right? So you're creating behavior. If I have to track my health, the number one thing is for me to kind of create some form of behavior change because I'm not healthy.
Right.
The other thing is obviously creating the technology around it to enable that. And obviously, having a business conduciveness for that to happen. Right.
So you need the pre-op and post-op care or and the post-op
so
care
there's
to
fund
talk to each
allocation. So
other.
there's actually money allocation. There is resource allocation.
Right.
There's also the founder needs to kind of be behind this and support this,
So it's
etc.
basically a concept of thinking outside of what you're actually the core.
So that's one way of looking at
vision
product,
is.
right? So that's one way of looking at product. So as we discussed Tristan Harris, whose perspective was looking at product from the perspective of ethics, right? I look at technology because I primarily came to technology because I want to augment people's abilities or my own ability to do something, right? So I look at it from an augmentative perspective, which is great because now that's what we are headed towards. Technology is an enabler
For everything in life, basically.
Correct, right?
Yeah.
So that's one framework that I'm working on, and it's kind of working out for education, media, healthcare.
So it's basically, again, it's one of those sort of set of rules. If you apply to most problems, will show that problem in a certain light.
Correct.
And I think,
And there's a certain way to do it, right?
Yeah.
So you need a certain kind of people, and you can also use historical data to know that you can do this and get away with it.
Right.
You also know what's expected of of the team, and what kind of a team you want.
So just to bring the conversation back to what we started with, right? I mean, I know I've generally said dissed product as a role in general, but what you explained and what you're essentially even doing is just going deeper and deeper into a problem and around a problem.
Yeah.
So I think one of the biggest skill sets is just articulation of it then.
Yeah.
Just to be able to think it and then articulate it, because only when you articulate it can you find people to solve for those roles.
Yeah.
If I articulate a problem well enough from all sides, then I can find the right teammates, I can hire the right people, go to the right partners and so on, right? I mean, obviously I'll understand my users also better and so on. So I think anything to do with product and product thinking is all about eventually about better articulation, right?
It's about articulating the problem and also understanding, where you stand and where you want to be, right? It's also about prioritization. I can articulate 10 problems a day, right? But if I'm not able to prioritize which ones I'm going to allocate my funds, resources, people, talent, etc., or my bandwidth towards, then I'm never going to do well. So it's also about prioritization, and and it's about building soft power. Because if you're a product person, whether you're a founder, it doesn't matter whether you're a founder, product manager, or a CFO or a marketing person, you need to have leverage, right, to kind of get people to do what you want. And that's what a product person does at the end of the day, right? You have to be, for all the talk that I have for frameworks and processes and stuff.
You have to basically convince other
You have
people
to
to
bring
do
people
your
along.
You have
thinking.
to, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to, and that's non-negotiable. So
you have to go to tech, you have to go to marketing, you have to go to
design. You need
design,
you need
You
to
need
kind of
everybody.
convince people to
Yeah.
do that. And you're also selling a story. You are selling a story, right? And you co-founded Hipcast, and you're selling the story that with Hipcast you are X plus delta, right?
Yes.
And that's a delta that you're selling them. And it requires a whole bunch of being able to persuade people to do things, and that can only be done with soft power, right? I mean, if I'm sitting in an auto and I'm saying, look, I can understand the problems of people.
First
sitting
you got into the auto and he agreed to take you somewhere. So that's already that's the first problem you
So I'm
solve.
sitting in an auto, and I tend to say that, look, I understand the problems of people sitting in Mercedes, right, in Merx, then, I have to convince the people in Merx that, look, I understand your problem to start with, right? And that's soft power. So, you need to kind of cultivate that skill set.
Wow, is this a product thinking or is this more a politician thinking?
Well, it's not.
This is what it's sounding
getting
like.
shit done thinking.
Yeah.
No, get shit done, right? So it's really, really important that you have that, leverage over people to get them to do what you want, right? And you don't have to be a manipulator. You just have to get stuff done, because end of the day, the buck stops with you. Right. If you work in product, the buck stops with you. So I don't have success pricing like how Princeton does, right? But I still have incentives. So the way I work with companies is that there is a set fee that they pay me as a retainer, and then they pay me like a success fee or an incentive.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have to earn my incentive.
Yep.
Right. And the only way I earn my incentive is to, not get into fights with their tech team or their design team or the finance team, for sure. So, So I think on a parting note, I think the ecosystem is very, very nascent. We are a relatively new product ecosystem. We've always been a services-led economy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Products are very, very new here. There is people need to be open to all kinds of ideas and frameworks and stuff. But I think India is very unique in the sense that we are going to create our own frameworks.
Yeah.
Right.
The first one was called Jugaad, the most famous framework we know.
Yeah. So it's not a framework. I mean, it's
that was the joke.
Yeah. So I mean, I think we need to uplift people, right? And a lot of people don't have democratic access to data, or there's no access. So your problem solving for access. So first thing is upliftment before they are on a level playing field. In the UK, for instance, it's easy to create a product because there's homogeneity in the kind of
everyone has this, assume this, and so on.
Right. So you can assume everyone speaks English. Per se, I mean, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
And everyone can understand what you're building, the certain level of cognitive ability, all of that. But in India, you need to first uplift them. So I think one of the reasons I'm so committed to augmentative systems is because I want products to kind of uplift people to an even playing field, so that others can come in. So simplest example of this is Paytm, right? So Paytm and others, obviously, they uplifted people to a level where everyone can pay digitally, or at least accept payments theoretically digitally. That got everyone on a level playing field where Google could now come in with Tez and say, look, right, you could do this. I'm not saying that they're going to be successful or not. I'm not predicting it, but I'm saying they level the playing field, and that's what's important. So I think the next 5 years in the Indian ecosystem is going to be amazing, and I want to play a part in kind of building augmentative systems, and have that framework. Get people to uplift people to a level where everyone can compete with the same resources.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great. So I think we went really deep into product there, and I hope, if you're a founder or if you're planning on being a founder, I think some of this might really help you contextualize and prioritize the kind of stuff you get into. So, all right. Thanks so much, Bala. I think that was a great bunch of concepts, but I think it was pretty clear, right? It's all about solving problems, and if you have focus, I think you can get all of this done. Yeah. So
it's important to kind of have a focus and kind of defocus once in a while. Right. But one more thing, I'm going to open up my research on augmentative systems, put it up online as we go along the way.
That'd be great. Send us the link. We'll put the link in the. We'll put the link in the show notes and description stuff like that.
I'm on your Slack channel, so people can ask me questions and stuff. But thanks so much for having me.
No, it's great to have you. Thanks for coming.
Great to have you here. Yep. And as a parting note, this time let me tell everyone to join the Slack channel, which is on our
I'm going to let you say it. You want to say it? You say it.
Yes. Okay. So ivmpodcast.com/01.
There you go.
And subscribe, and we'll add you to the Slack channel. And obviously, if you're listening to us on iTunes or any other favorite podcasting app, go leave a review, give us 5 stars if you really like us. And
even if you don't, it's okay. Just give us 5 stars. Sorry.
And spread the word. And thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. Sorry to say, but there's been a slight delay due to the apocalypse having suddenly begun. As you can see, there's death, destruction, and chaos taking place all around us. But don't you worry, food and drinks will be served shortly, and I would recommend checking out
IVM Podcasts
to get some of your favorite Indian podcasts. We'll keep you going till this whole thing blows over. Thank you.